or were there, a star there really, or was it just, the whole deception argument that people raise, that it seems to be an incredible amount of detail that would make God somewhat of a deceiver? What about that?
It's not that God deceives. The problem is we start with anti-biblical assumptions, and then we interpret the evidence, and it comes out different than what the Bible says, and then we say, well, God, you deceived me. Well, that's not the issue at all. The problem is we've deceived ourselves. We've started with the assumptions of naturalism, ultimately. And take Adam, for example. Now, God made Adam as an adult, and if you applied naturalistic thinking to that, in other words, if you assumed that Adam came about by the same kind of process by which people come about today, you would get a vastly inflated age for Adam, wouldn't you?
Okay, so listen, let's take a break, because when we come back, I'm going to ask you guys about you're walking in the garden maybe on day 7, and you bump into Adam. Would you see a man that is apparently in his 30s, say, or would you see something else? I mean, I don't know. We're talking with Dr. Jason Lisle and Dr. Hugh Ross, and we're calling it Thousands or Billions, and it has to do with the age of the earth and the age of the cosmos. We're going to get in now to the age of man and man's origin, as well as maybe dinosaurs and the flood and all of that. So stay tuned. We're going to continue straight ahead here at the intersection of faith and reason on the Frank Pastore Show at 99.5 KKLA. Here's KKLA FM Los Angeles, the intersection of faith and reason here at the Frank Pastore Show. We're talking with Drs. Hugh Ross and Jason Lisle. They're both Christians, both love the Lord, both believe in biblical inerrancy, both hostile to naturalism and evolution. And yet they are both Ph.D.s in astrophysics, and they disagree on some pretty important stuff, typically mainly the cosmology and the age of the earth, and we haven't even talked about dinosaurs and the flood and all that kind of stuff. So Jason, let me start with you in this segment. Let's talk about Adam. So if I'm walking around early in the Garden of Eden and I bump into this guy, I look at him, he's in his 30s, it would look to be, maybe in his 20s, but he's certainly not, 6 days old kind of thing, and I have no problem with that. If I were to go over to a tree and start hacking through the bark, I would expect to see tree rings, and it would give the appearance that, the tree's, decades old maybe, but I'm told from Scripture it's only 6 days old. Or if I dated rocks, if I looked at bacteria in a pond somewhere, I get that. Why is it that when people look through a telescope and they see the cosmos, they don't make the same assumption that, well, it's just created with the appearance of age? First of all, is that an accurate description of a young Earth view?
I think you're right. I would change the terminology just a little bit, though. I wouldn't say that Adam appears old. I mean, if you asked Adam how old was he, you say, Adam, do you think you look 30 years old? And you say, what's a 30-year-old? He's on 1 day old, right?
Right.
But because we apply thinking, natural kind of thinking, if we assume that Adam came about the same way that people come about today, we would draw an incorrect conclusion for his age. Likewise for the tree with the rings. Likewise for the stars and galaxies. And so you say, why do people apply a different philosophy when they look at the universe? Well, I think because they're logically inconsistent, because they bought into the pagan reasoning of the day that the universe came about by a natural process. And Frank, every old Earth argument I've ever heard, or old universe argument I've ever heard, actually commits the fallacy of begging the question, which is that it subtly assumes the very thing that it's trying to prove. And that comes down to this, the fact that the universe was created in a mature fashion according to the Scriptures. And I'd like to give you just a couple examples real quick. And I want to borrow these from what you said in the previous segment. Hugh said that stars would never form in a universe that's thousands of years old. But you see, that begs the question, doesn't it? Because in my view, stars didn't form. God made them, and He made them on the fourth day, according to Genesis 1:16. And so Hugh has effectively assumed that my view of creation is wrong, and then come to the conclusion that my view of creation is wrong. Well, it's hardly surprising, given that that's the assumption he started with.
All right, well, let's let him respond on that. So, Dr. Ross, if you bump into Adam, I mean, everything I just said to Jason, what is your experience? I mean, there's tree rings, there's bacteria, there's Adam that, appears to be what we would say 30 years old, but how do you respond to Jason? I mean, why couldn't God have done that with the whole cosmos?
He could have, but he said clearly in His Word that He did not, that the heavens declare the glory of God. The heavens reveal the righteousness of God. Psalm 19 refers to the record of nature as a book. It's actually in the Belgic Confession, 1561, that God gave us 2 books, and both books are utterly trustworthy and reliable. God's not going to deceive us through either the Bible or the record of nature, and I would dispute that Adam is an example of appearance of age. He would only be an example of appearance of age if God made him as a baby, But the text is very clear. He was not made as a baby. God made the chicken first, not the egg. Likewise, I'd say the same thing with Eve. She was not created as a baby.
Right.
And if a scientist was there measuring the age of Adam, he would not find scar tissue. He wouldn't find any more than 60 milligrams of cholesterol in his blood. All the evidences would be that he was brand new. And, when we look at the universe, we're actually looking back in time. And so astronomers can look back in time and see if there was a moment when stars did not exist. And in fact, we have photo images of the universe where stars are not existing. We can see a place where stars exist, but not galaxies. And so as we look back in time, the principle here is the farther away you look, the farther back in time you're seeing, because it takes light time to travel to our telescope.
But Hugh, it seems as though, let me interrupt for a second. It seems as though if I were to look at Adam or to cut into his tissue or to cut into a tree, under our understanding of time, he's going to be 30 years old and on all the tree rings, right? But why couldn't I, when I look at, okay, that's what I need to know. Why? I mean, because I would think, why can't you just do that? Stars were created in place. They were, black holes were created. And maybe you're committing the fallacy that Jason talked about. Maybe you're just begging the question.
But in astronomy, we directly observe the past. We don't see the present, but we do see the past. And so we can challenge the claim that stars were not formed. God just simply put them in situ. Well, then how do we explain the fact that we have photo images of the universe where there aren't any stars, it's just the cosmic background radiation, and how that cosmic background radiation first leads to stars and star clusters, then galaxies, and we can see the galaxies taking on different characteristics of age. Their color changes as we get closer and closer to our galaxy. So we can see a history. It's like looking through a photo album of your grandfather, and you can see the early photos where he's a little toddler, and then he gradually gets older and older. We can do the same thing with the universe. In fact, what makes astronomy such a powerful science for supporting the Christian worldview is we can directly witness the cosmic creation event. And in witnessing the cosmic creation event, we come up with our most powerful evidences that indeed there's a beginning to space-time, matter, and energy. The universe is continuously expanded from that. And I've written a couple of articles where I make the point the Bible said it first.
All right, let me jump in.
Cosmology was taught in the Bible.
Okay, now I get that, and then that sounds very plausible to me, Jason. When you saying it that way, how would you respond to what he just said?
Well, there's so much to cover here, and I know I'm not going to get to it all. So let me point
and that's why you both have websites and a whole bunch of resources and things. But go ahead.
A lot of these questions are answered at answersingenesis.org. Answersingenesis.org. I also have a book on this topic too, Old Earth Creationism on Trial. And people can get that through the website at answersingenesis.org. Let me hit just a couple issues here real quick.
Okay, we got about 2 minutes and then another break. Go ahead.
Very quickly then, Hugh said that nature is a book. Now, I would dispute that. I think it's okay poetically to call it a book, but not literally. In fact, he said something, unless I misunderstood him, I think he said that Psalm 19 indicates that. Well, Psalm 19 indicates the exact opposite. If you look at Psalm 19, it's talking about the general revelation of God, but it indicates that it's not a book. If you look in verse 3, it says that there is no speech nor language. Now, you see, a book is comprised of speech and language. It's comprised of sentences, but verse 3 indicates that there is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard, is the way that it's, in fact, the way it's translated in the NAS.
But read verse 4. Their words go to the ends of the world.
Yes, but not literally. In fact, because in fact you're going to have a contradiction if you take that literally, isn't it? Because verse 3 says, there is no speech, nor are there words. In other words, Psalm is telling us that there is a message that creation has, but it's not a message comprised of words. It's not a message comprised of sentences. And so I would dispute that claim that there's two books. In fact, I think that will inevitably lead to various theological problems because you're going to try to interpret God's perfect word in light of man's fallible opinion of nature.
Well, let's take a break at this point. And when we come back, I still want to ask you both about dinosaurs and the flood. And Dr. Ross will have you lead the next segment. And then I also, in light of what Jason just said, I want to know from both of you guys when we come back, what do you think is at stake in this dispute? I mean, why does it matter that Christians even consider this age of the earth problem or this age of the earth issue? We'll do that straight ahead as we continue here at the intersection of faith and reason with Drs. Hugh Ross and Jason Lisle on the Frank Pastore Show at 99.5 KKOL.